Hello there, GB here, and welcome to Fast Forward, where I follow up on episodes of Rewind classic movies to look at what happened after those iconic films came out. Today we're diving back into the relentless, ruthless, red-eyed robot serial killer movie that is James Cameron's The Terminator. We'll look at everything from the Salvation sequel plans and Genesis sequel plans to the $60 million mini T2 sequel that wasn't Rise of the Machines, where Arnie takes young John Connor into the future war. So let's steal clothes from a homeless man, literally saw off a shotgun, and grip our hands together tightly as we make sweet, sweet love in a cheap motel, and fast forward to what happened after 1984's The Terminator. The sequels. The Terminator was never supposed to launch a franchise, but it did. The surprise success spawned 5 sequels, each attempting to capture the original's magic. T2 Judgment Day in '91 was a triumph and still one of the greatest sequels ever. Then there was Terminator 3 Rise of the Machines. But what's lesser known is that 3 separate sequel trilogies were planned and abandoned. Terminator Salvation in 2009 was to start a future war trilogy. Rumours suggested Part 2 would have had Skynet time travel into present-day London. Director McGee said about his plans, open quote, "I strongly suspect the next movie is going to take place in 2011. John Connor is going to travel back in time and he's going to have to galvanise the militaries of the world for an impending Skynet invasion. They've figured out time travel to the degree where they can send more than one naked entity. So you're going to have hunter-killers and transports and harvesters and everything arriving in our time and Connor fighting back with conventional military warfare, which I think is going to be fucking awesome." End quote. McGee also intended to retcon Sarah's death, which occurred off-screen before Rise of the Machines, and have Linda Hamilton return for the 5th film. It would have also featured Robert Patrick as a 60-year-old scientist researching cell replication, as if a shapeshifter like the T-1000 would need design inspiration to begin with. Part 3 may have seen Terminators gain sentience beyond programming. But bankruptcy ended it all. In 2014, Dark Horse Comics published a 12-issue sequel, a series called Terminator Salvation: The Final Battle, which revisited key characters like John Connor, Marcus Wright, and Dr. Serena Kogan, weaving their arcs into a finale. Genesis in 2015 introduced an alternate timeline with Pops Arnold. It ended on a cliffhanger with back-to-back sequels penciled in for 2017 and 2018 by Paramount, but were quietly dropped after box office disappointment. That means we never got another Judgment Day for Part 2, or more of J.K. Simmons, whose alcoholic police detective survived, or John Connor's story. Actor Jason Clarke said a few years later, "What I remember was that the second one was going to be about John's journey after he was taken by Skynet, like going down to what he became, half machine, half man. That's where the second one was going to start, and that's about all I knew. It's such a bummer we didn't get to do that." Dark Fate in 2019 ignored the others, brought back Linda Hamilton, and had a trilogy roadmap too. The story was meant to follow new heroine Dani Ramos, with Part 2 due in early 2022. Cameron said there was a 3-story arc that would culminate in, quotes, "the ultimate and inescapable showdown between humanity and AI." But again, the first movie flopped, and plans were scrapped. Linda Hamilton felt the series needed a lower budget movie, but seemed happy to draw a line under it all, saying, "I would be quite happy to never return. So no, I'm not hopeful because I would really love to be done." Each attempt shows a franchise trying to find its future and getting rebooted every time. Like Judgment Day, it's unavoidable. I haven't mentioned that mini-sequel to T2 yet that isn't Rise of the Machines. It's coming. I'll also talk in a moment about a couple of TV shows that almost happened, but before that, games galore. From 1991, The Terminator became a video game staple. There were 8 gun shooters, arcade light gun games, and modern FPS titles. One of my favourites back in the day was the crossover game RoboCop vs. The Terminator, released on Sega and Nintendo in 1993, where you would play as RoboCop fighting Skynet's machines. This game was based on a comic by Frank Miller and was a huge hit with fans, like me, of both franchises. Over the years, the Terminator even guest starred in other popular games. For instance, the T-800 appeared as a downloadable fighter in Mortal Kombat 11 and Fortnite, among others, while 2019's Terminator Resistance is a first-person shooter set during the future war. 2025 will see the release of Terminator Survivors, where you'll play as a part of a group trying to stay alive in an open world set set in the aftermath of Judgment Day, and Terminator 2D No Fate, an old-fashioned but beautiful side-scroller where you go back to the story of the second film. TV shows. The franchise made a bold leap to TV with Terminator: The Sarah Connor Chronicles in 2008, following Sarah and teenage John after T2. It introduced a new female Terminator ally, Summer Glau, as a character called Cameron. But it was cancelled after season 2, leaving fans on a massive cliffhanger. A teenage John Connor travelled to the future and discovered he's no longer the Resistance leader. Judgment Day happened and humanity is still at war with Skynet. According to Thomas Dekker, who played Connor, the cancelled third season would have told the story of John's rise in the future. It would have intercut with Sarah, who chose to stay in the past and continue her battle to stop Skynet. Terminator Salvation, the Machinima series, is a bit of an unusual one, taking place between the events of Terminator 3, Rise of the Machines, and Terminator Salvation. The series was created using computer animation from the Terminator Salvation video game, and serves as a prequel to it. Moon Bloodgood returned to voice Blair Williams for 6 episodes that were just over 10 minutes each. 2024 saw the release of a new anime series on Netflix called Terminator Zero for 8 episodes. Set in 1997, a Tokyo scientist is on the verge of launching an advanced AI designed to rival Skynet. But on the eve of Judgment Day, he and his 3 children become the targets of a relentless robot assassin, just as a mysterious soldier from the year 2022 arrives to protect them. The English version even gets the voices of Rosario Dawson as the AI system and Timothy Oliphant as the Terminator. One especially intriguing abandoned project in the franchise's history is what we might call the Young John Connor TV series that never happened. After the success of Terminator 2, there was talk of exploring John Connor's early years in more depth. Rumours in the early 2000s suggested producers were considering a TV project set during John's adolescence, with John living off the radar. The idea would have been to see the events that shaped John into the leader he becomes, but it never happened, and the Sarah Connor Chronicles sort of took its place. Another unmade project was Terminator 3000, a proposed 3D animated feature film around 2010. The idea was to retell the Terminator story in CGI animation, aimed at a slightly younger audience with a PG-13 rating. A $70 million budget was floated around, and even Cameron's name was mentioned as a possible producer. However, the project ran into rights issues almost immediately, a cease and desist from the rights holders shut it down, and Terminator 3000 was put on indefinite hold. I might come back to a Terminator 3000 thing later, as well as that mini T2 sequel very soon. The comics. Starting in the late 1980s, Terminator comics have continued and reimagined the story. One early series, titled The Terminator Tempest, followed what happened right after the events of the first film, with Skynet sending additional cyborgs to 1984 and the Resistance sending more protectors. The comics were a gold mine of what-if scenarios and alternate timelines. Then there were the crossover comics. There was RoboCop vs. the Terminator in 1992, Alien vs. Predator vs. the Terminator in 2000, a wild mashup where Ripley and a Predator team up to stop Skynet from creating an Alien-Terminator hybrid, and even Superman crossed paths with Terminators in Superman vs. the Terminator, Death to the Future in 2000. The mini T2 sequel. T2 3D Battle Across Time was a 1996 sequel to Terminator 2 that was directed by James Cameron and starred Arnie, Linda Hamilton, Robert Patrick and Edward Furlong. It cost $24 million but only lasts for 12 minutes, making it one of the most expensive films per minute ever made. And it looks just like a proper T2 sequel, albeit with a slightly older John Connor. So why have you probably never heard of it? Well, it was an innovative theme park attraction that blended live actors with 3D film at Universal Studios Florida, Hollywood and Japan. After a pre-show appearance by the Connors, the main show is set in a 700-seat theatre where the audience witnessed the demonstration of Cyberdyne's T-70 Terminators. The presentation was disrupted by the arrival of a live-action T-800, played by a Schwarzenegger lookalike on a Harley-Davidson, who takes our John Connor lookalike through a time portal to the future where they become actual Arnie and actual Edward Furlong in their character roles. They battled various adversaries including the T-1000 and the formidable T-1,000,000, a massive spider-like Terminator. The show concluded with the destruction of Skynet and a dramatic return to the present. It's perhaps the closest thing we've ever had to a true T2 sequel, but closed down at different times for the 3 locations, with the final showing in 2020 in Japan. Creative fallout. The first Terminator film didn't just launch a franchise, it reshaped James Cameron's life. After divorcing his first wife in 1984, he married Terminator producer Gale Ann Hurd in 1985. They were divorced 4 years later. He married director Catherine Bigelow from 1989 to 1991, before starting a relationship with Sarah Connor actress Linda Hamilton in 91 and having a child together in 93. Then they were said to have separated for a while in 97 when Cameron met actress Susie Amos on the set of Titanic, before he married Linda Hamilton later in 97. They divorced in 1999 before he married Susie in 2000. And you think that's a bit bonkers? I've got more for you. Terminator 3000 EI. I'm going to leave you with one last Terminator link. I mentioned earlier about Terminator 3000, the animated film that almost got made. Well, now you have the Terminator 3000 EI. The ultimate in flooring removal technology. With zero emissions or fumes and removal rates of 80 to 90% of the majority of floor coverings on the first pass, the Terminator 3000 EI from Contech is the preferred choice for indoor flooring removal. Amazing. Anyway, join me and AJ next week for the main Rewind show, as we'll be going to 1988 to talk about a film where Elvis's ex-wife shows her nice beaver to a clumsy whitehead cop trying to stop the assassination of the Queen. I cannot wait. Sorry about the mess. See you next time.